The lazy teacher Westwood High School stood quietly in the middle of a peaceful town surrounded by narrow streets and old maple trees. Every morning the loud school bell echoed across the neighborhood, while students hurried toward their classrooms carrying heavy backpacks. Among all the teachers in the school, one man was famous for a very unusual reason. His name was Mr. Robert Wilson, and he was the laziest teacher anyone had ever seen. Mr. Wilson taught history to 9th and 10th grade students at Westwood High School every single day. He was a tall man with messy brown hair, sleepy eyes, and wrinkled shirts that always looked unfinished. He carried the same old coffee mug every morning, and yawned almost every few minutes during class. Most teachers entered classrooms with energy and excitement every morning before the first school bell rang loudly. Mr. Wilson walked into class like a tired man returning home after working endlessly for several exhausting years. Every morning he entered slowly, placed his bag on the desk, and opened a textbook halfway. Then he repeated the same sentence students had memorized by heart after hearing it hundreds of times already. Read the chapter yourselves. Independent learning builds character. After saying that, he leaned backward in his chair and closed his eyes peacefully near the classroom window. While students whispered, laughed, and secretly used their phones under the desks, Mr. Wilson rested comfortably in silence. Sometimes he even snored softly during class, while students tried hard not to laugh loudly at the situation. At first, the students loved him. There was no homework, no strict rules, and no surprise tests waiting for them during history period. History class felt more like free time than an actual school lesson students were expected to study seriously. But after a few months, the excitement slowly disappeared from the classroom and frustration quietly took its place. Students began struggling badly during exams because they had learned almost nothing throughout the entire school year. Other history classes scored high marks, while Mr. Wilson's students continued failing repeatedly in almost every test. Parents started complaining during school meetings and students became increasingly worried about their upcoming final examinations. Still, nothing changed. Whenever teachers discussed the problem inside the staff room, Mr. Wilson simply shrugged while sipping coffee lazily. Modern education is stressful, he would say calmly, while sitting comfortably beside the large staff room window. I believe in giving students mental peace. The school principal, Mrs. Anderson, had already warned him several times about his careless teaching methods recently. Robert, you cannot continue teaching like this anymore, she said one afternoon with visible frustration on her face. Your students are suffering. Mr. Wilson nodded seriously, as if he completely understood every single problem she was talking about carefully. You are absolutely right, he replied calmly before taking another slow sip from his coffee mug without concern. But the next morning he returned to sleeping during class exactly as before without changing anything at all. Then one Monday everything suddenly changed inside Westwood High School after an important government notice arrived unexpectedly. The school received official information that a government inspection team would visit within the next 2 weeks. The inspectors would evaluate classrooms, teaching quality, student performance, discipline, and the overall academic environment carefully. Schools with poor reports could lose important funding and face serious educational problems in the future afterwards. Panic spread across the entire school building almost immediately after the announcement reached teachers and students together. Teachers rushed to prepare lesson plans, while students revised chapters nervously for the upcoming inspection visit carefully. Charts and educational posters suddenly appeared on every wall throughout the school building overnight without explanation. Even the sports teacher became unusually serious for the first time students could actually remember seeing him behave professionally. Only Mr. Wilson remained completely calm. While other teachers worked anxiously in the staff room, he sat comfortably near the window eating fresh donuts. "You don't seem worried," said Mrs. Taylor, the science teacher, while organizing papers nervously across her desk quickly. Mr. Wilson slowly sipped his coffee and shrugged lazily without showing even the smallest amount of concern whatsoever. "Worry requires energy," he replied. Mrs. Taylor stared at him in disbelief. "The inspectors are going to sit inside your classroom and observe your lesson carefully during the inspection period." "They are welcome to," Mr. Wilson answered calmly while continuing to enjoy his coffee and donuts peacefully there. "The chairs are comfortable." Meanwhile, the students of Class 10B became increasingly desperate as the final history examination slowly approached nearer daily. Most students barely understood the syllabus because proper teaching had almost completely disappeared from their classroom environment already. One afternoon, the class monitor, Ethan Carter, finally stood up during history period and gathered enough courage to speak. "Sir, we really need proper lessons," Ethan said carefully, while the rest of the class watched nervously in silence. Mr. Wilson slowly opened one eye. The inspection is very close, and we still don't understand most chapters properly," Ethan explained with growing frustration clearly. Mr. Wilson stretched lazily in his chair before answering, while several students exchanged hopeless looks with each other silently. "History already happened. Why rush?" The entire class groaned loudly. Ethan took a deep breath and tried once more despite feeling increasingly frustrated by the situation every passing day. "Sir, please! We are serious." For several moments, Mr. Wilson remained silent while staring quietly across the classroom filled with nervous students silently waiting. Then unexpectedly, he slowly stood up from his chair and walked toward the blackboard without saying another word. The students became completely silent immediately. For the first time in months, he picked up a piece of chalk and actually prepared himself to teach properly. "Fine," he sighed dramatically. "Open chapter 6. Everyone quickly opened their books with surprise and confusion spreading visibly across their faces at the same time. And then something unbelievable happened. Mr. Wilson actually started teaching. Not only teaching brilliantly. He explained historical events like emotional stories instead of boring facts and lifeless dates from old textbooks completely. Wars became meaningful, revolutions became inspiring, and famous leaders suddenly felt human and emotionally real to students finally. For the first time all year, every student listened carefully without distraction while the classroom remained completely focused and silent. Even Ethan forgot to take notes, because he was completely absorbed in listening carefully to every single word spoken. When the bell rang 40 minutes later, nobody moved from their seats because they were still deeply focused on him. One student looked at him with amazement and finally asked the question everyone had secretly been thinking about recently. "Sir, if you can teach like this, then why don't you do it every day?" Mr. Wilson slowly placed the chalk down on the table and looked quietly across the classroom for several moments. "Because doing things properly is exhausting," he answered honestly, while students immediately burst into loud laughter together afterward. But deep inside, many students suddenly felt disappointed after realizing the truth about their teacher's hidden abilities completely. Their teacher was not untalented. He was simply lazy. Over the next 2 weeks, pressure from the inspection forced Mr. Wilson to continue teaching regularly inside the classroom daily. He still yawned often and complained dramatically about hard work, while students laughed quietly at his endless excuses constantly. But the students learned more history during those 2 weeks than they had learned throughout the entire school year previously. Finally, inspection day arrived. 3 officials entered Class 10B carrying clipboards and serious expressions, while Principal Anderson followed nervously behind them quietly. "Please continue your lesson normally," one inspector said, while taking a seat near the back corner of the classroom. Mr. Wilson nodded slowly and stared at the open textbook resting on his desk silently for several long moments afterward. The entire classroom became silent. Then suddenly he closed the textbook completely and stood up from his chair with unexpected confidence and calmness visible. "Today," he announced calmly, "we will not memorize history." The principal nearly stopped breathing. The inspectors exchanged confused looks with each other immediately, while students waited silently for what would happen next afterward. Mr. Wilson slowly walked toward the center of the classroom and looked carefully at every student sitting before him quietly. "Instead," he continued, "we will understand why history matters." Something about him felt completely different now. For the next 40 minutes, the classroom transformed into something extraordinary that nobody inside the room would ever forget afterward. Mr. Wilson spoke with confidence and intelligence none of the students had fully seen before during regular school lessons earlier. He connected ancient events to modern society and explained human behavior through historical mistakes made repeatedly over centuries. The inspectors listened carefully, while students answered confidently and participated actively throughout the discussion happening passionately inside class. The room felt alive with curiosity, excitement, and genuine interest for the very first time all year long there. When the bell finally rang, one inspector smiled warmly at him before standing up slowly from his chair respectfully afterward. "That was one of the best history lessons we have ever seen," he said quietly, while everyone remained completely silent afterward. Principal Anderson looked completely stunned. After the inspectors left, students surrounded Mr. Wilson excitedly near his desk, while speaking over each other enthusiastically together. "Sir, you were amazing. You should teach like this every day. History finally makes sense now." Mr. Wilson raised one tired hand slowly. "Please calm down," he sighed dramatically. "Too many compliments create responsibility." The class burst into loud laughter once again. But from the next morning onward, something quietly changed inside the classroom without anyone needing to officially mention it aloud. Mr. Wilson still entered the classroom lazily every day, carrying his old coffee mug and wrinkled shirts without embarrassment. He still yawned and complained about work constantly, while students laughed quietly at his dramatic personality during lessons daily. Yet every morning, after opening the textbook, he now slowly stood up and picked up the chalk sincerely. Not perfectly, not energetically every time, but sincerely. And years later, long after students forgot exam marks and homework assignments, many still remembered one important lesson clearly. Talent becomes useless when laziness controls it.